The Theodore Roosevelt Inaugural Site is a unique and important part of the Buffalo community. In 1901, President McKinley was shot and later died in Buffalo during the Pan American Exposition. Vice President Teddy Roosevelt traveled to Buffalo and was inaugurated as the 26th President of the United States in what was then called the Wilcox Mansion, located on Delaware Avenue in Buffalo. The Wilcox Mansion remains one of only 6 locations outside of Washington, D.C. where a presidential inauguration took place. After many years of neglect and changes in use, by the late 1960s, the Wilcox Mansion was in disrepair and in danger of being demolished to make room for private development. Around that time, a group of women stepped in to save the mansion and to preserve it for future generations. The Junior League of Buffalo started with no money and no formal organization to save and to restore the house. This is the story of how this group of women volunteers impacted their community and changed history.
Word on the site was when the possibility of the building being torn down came to the attention of the Junior League of Buffalo. And the question was put to us, did we want to participate in saving the site? And if so, we needed to raise $50,000 to put into our community trust fund, which maybe had a few $1,000s at the time. And so we didn't have to raise it all in one year. We had a period of time. The Junior League needed to step up, make the commitment to raise the money, and be there as part of the restoration effort.
They stepped up to the gate when, with their $50,000. It was the 50th anniversary of the Junior League of Buffalo, and that at that time was a very large sum of money, and it was the largest sum of money that the league ever donated to anything.
In Buffalo, it's not easy to raise money, at least it wasn't back then, to raise dollars. But people were more than willing to give up their time and their expertise.
All of a sudden we had children saving pennies and putting it on tape and bringing it to the front door when people were there. We had Boy Scouts and Cub Scouts collecting money, and League of Women Voters did something, and the Republican Party they were doing all kinds of fundraising, having a dinner, with a speaker about the site. This is what we're doing for the United States of America. We want a presidential house here.
The Junior League's first effort at raising funds was a Follies, as I recall, that we did at Kleinhans Music Hall, song and dance show, which after many rehearsals and many costumes and many sore feet from dancing in high heels, we raised some of the money. One of the other fundraisers was here in the house throughout the first floor, which had no partitions in it, by the way. It was all just one big restaurant dining room, and windows were broken and graffiti on the walls, but it was summertime. We had a lot of potted palms around and flowers, and we all dressed in clothes of the 1901 with hats with big feathers on them, and we raised quite a bit of money at that cocktail event. So raising the money to be sure that we were going to be able to pull it off, and then working with the federal government to assure that we would have ongoing funding stream to keep the house going once we got it open.
Getting the funding, we went to Albany and Washington and lobbied Les Fascio, myself. And that was, it was denied, and then we get a little bit, but then finally we received the okay from National Park Service that they would up to 2/3 of the operating budget with a cap on that. So that was the day that we all thought we had arrived. Nothing could be better. Of course, at that time, we just had the library, and the dining room was there, but nothing there. So it was just really the main room. And there really, at the beginning, research was a big thing. They would meet and read books on TR, and we'd get speakers to come in. People would call in to the paper, and they'd call into the Historical Society with saying, I have this, I have that, because the Buffalo News was an important part also, because they would publish pictures that we had found, that the people that the Junior League had researched, and some of the people at the Historical Society. And then people that had attended the auction had pictures, and they got them when they had gone to the auction, and they were made available there. So it's some of the family. There was a woman, Mrs. Plimpton. She was a niece of Ainsley Wilcox, and she lived in Washington, D.C., and she had a lot of pictures which she shared with us and gave to us. So it was like playing detective, and it was exciting. When you found something, it was really exciting. Somebody in Medina called and said, I have these dresses. Well, I went down there, and they were even more magnificent, and they were like, I had to make 2 trips. There were so many. So unbelievable. There's a lamp that sits in the library. It's a lady lamp, and that was in the pictures, and it came through a woman someone told us that she had collection, and we called her out on Lake Shore, and we went out and looked, and sure enough, the lamp looked exactly like it, and she claimed that she got it at the auction.
I think one of the most fun moments was when we found the chandeliers that are in the library where TR was sworn in. We had a picture, of course, of the room, so we knew what the chandeliers looked like, and we knew that there were pieces and parts of that room that had been auctioned off when all the furnishings were auctioned, but we didn't know where they were. And as I recall, we advertised in the paper, maybe we ran a picture of the room, but we got a call from an antique dealer out on Main Street in Clarence. Someone will remember his name. I'm pretty sure he's still out there on the left-hand side going towards Batavia. And I went out there, we drove out there one night with several of us, and we walked into the man's home, and there hanging over his dining room table, all electrified, was one of the chandeliers. And we just stood there, it was all polished beautifully. We just said, oh, there it is, there it is. And he said, and the other one's in the loft, in the barn. I've never done anything with it. It's just like it was when I bought them at the auction. It was a very strong team of volunteers from the Junior League at the beginning. Maybe over the period of 4 or 5 years that we raised money and got the site, the work done and got the site open. Maybe a number of 30 or so girls that went back and forth, somewhere on some years, somewhere on other years. We took turns, I think, being chairman of the committee. We used to meet at the Historical Society. Near the end, it was probably once a week. Usually in the beginning, I think once a month.
We had 8 volunteers when we started. So just think of that, because now, today, we know what we have, like over 200.
They have been the most steady, dedicated, marvelous volunteers.
Volunteers today are the lifeblood, just as they were when I became president in 1978, and even before then, with all their fundraising to keep the house alive. I think it's always been dependent on volunteers. I don't think the place would exist if it wasn't for the volunteer spirit. And that is another reason that Theodore Roosevelt is so popular, at least to me, because he was a great believer in volunteers. And the community has always been supportive. The volunteers today are the lifeblood, just as they were when I became president in 1978.
It's wonderful having volunteers here, and they bring so much. And we certainly couldn't have many of the fundraisers like our Victorian Christmas. Our Victorian Christmas fundraiser is totally volunteer run. A few staff members obviously are extremely important. All the staff helps, of course, but the volunteers really make it happen. It's really a volunteer event.
I think it's a centerpiece and a showpiece. People will come from all over the world. People who follow the Teddy Roosevelt story and follow the many sites across the country, National Park Service sites that highlight Teddy Roosevelt. he's such a quintessential American hero that I think people do like to come and remember America in that heyday of 1901.
It's brought an awareness of Theodore Roosevelt to the community.
It's given the community a lot of pride. I think the community has supported it, obviously, to be where we are today. But they were very proud.
Oh, I think that the passionate draw that we all felt for preserving a historical moment in our community and in our country's history, preserving it not only for our community, but for the rest of the nation, the rest of the world. And whether that's a woman thing or a man thing, I don't think women have a corner on that feeling. But we had the time in those days. Many of us were not working. We were raising our children, our families, of course, but we had time to do it. So I think in that regard, maybe the women's activities were critical because we had the time to devote. Except that it was a sad time for our community that we had a president who was shot and died in Buffalo as a result of the Pan American exhibition. A very great president. McKinley was very thoughtful and a very forward-thinking president. But we had someone come right behind him who embodied the American spirit of the conservationists, the great Western initiatives that Teddy took on conserving vast properties of land for the American parks. And so it was only fitting that this small piece of history at a rather dark day for the U.S., but a bright day for a new president, that we were all there and part of it in Western New York.